My hands were trembling as I stared at the text message from Jasmine that would shatter what little was left of my world. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. The words blurred through my tears as I sat alone in my tiny studio apartment, the silence deafening. 2 years ago, I thought I had found my soulmate, my true love, my escape from a mundane life. Instead, I had burned every bridge, destroyed every relationship, and lost everything I once held dear. Now, my new husband, Ryan, was cheating with my best friend, the only person who had stood by me through the wreckage. Before I tell you how I destroyed everything I once held dear, let me know where you're watching from. And please hit that like button if you've ever made a choice that changed your life forever. Subscribe if you want to hear how sometimes getting what you think you want becomes your worst nightmare. Looking back, my life in Cleveland, Ohio seemed perfect on paper. I was Teresa Morrison, married to David Morrison for 6 comfortable years. David worked as an accountant for a mid sized firm downtown, and we had settled into the kind of predictable routine that many couples fall into. Weekend grocery shopping, Sunday dinners with his family, annual vacations to the same lake house in Michigan. It was safe, stable, and utterly soul crushing. The Morrison family was well known in our neighborhood. They owned a traditional bakery that had been serving the community for 3 generations. David's parents, Robert and Eleanor, were respected pillars of the community, always hosting charity drives and organizing local events. But the real star of the Morrison family was Marcus Morrison, David's older brother. Marcus was everything David was not. At 31, he was a successful corporate lawyer with a pristine reputation, a beautiful wife named Sarah, and 2 adorable children who looked like they belonged in a catalog. Marcus was tall, confident, and charismatic in a way that made everyone gravitate toward him at family gatherings. He was the golden child who could do no wrong, while David lived perpetually in his shadow, always the reliable but unremarkable younger brother. I worked in marketing for a local manufacturing company, a job that paid well enough but never challenged me intellectually. My days were filled with creating promotional materials for industrial equipment, hardly the creative outlet I had dreamed of during my college years studying art history. The one bright spot in my professional life was my friendship with Jasmine, my coworker who had become my closest confidant over our 8 years working together. Our social life revolved entirely around the Morrison family orbit. Every weekend brought barbecues and Robert and Eleanor's backyard holiday celebrations that followed the same traditions year after year, and countless family gatherings where I felt more like an accessory than a valued member. I watched Sarah effortlessly navigate conversations about school fundraisers and soccer practices while I smiled politely and contributed little to discussions that never seemed to include my interests or opinions. The sense of invisibility in my own life was becoming unbearable. David was a good man, kind and dependable, but he never seemed to truly see me. When I mentioned wanting to take pottery classes, he would nod absently and change the subject to something practical like refinancing our mortgage. When I suggested we travel somewhere exotic instead of returning to the same lake house, he would laugh and say, "Why fix something that was not broken?" Then Ryan Morrison came back into our lives like a whirlwind of possibility. Ryan was the youngest Morrison brother at 28, and he had been living in Seattle for the past 5 years trying to make it as a freelance photographer. His startup had recently failed, forcing him to return home to Cleveland with little more than his camera equipment and a bruised ego. Unlike Marcus with his corporate success, or David with his steady reliability, Ryan was the artistic black sheep of the family, the dreamer who had never quite found his footing. I first really noticed Ryan at Marcus's birthday party in early spring. While everyone else was focused on Marcus's promotion announcement, Ryan was in the kitchen mixing creative cocktails and actually listening when I complimented his technique. He had these intense green eyes and an easy smile that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. When he asked about the art history degree I had mentioned months earlier at Christmas, I was shocked that he had remembered, and even more surprised that he wanted to hear my thoughts on local gallery exhibitions. Our conversation flowed effortlessly from photography to travel to books we had both read and loved. Ryan showed me photos on his phone from his road trips across the Pacific Northwest, stunning landscape shots that captured the kind of beauty and adventure I had always craved. For the first time in years, I felt intellectually stimulated, seen, and appreciated for who I really was beneath the surface of polite small talk. As the evening progressed, I found myself gravitating toward wherever Ryan was standing. We discovered shared interests in obscure documentaries, independent coffee shops, and the kind of spontaneous adventures that David would have planned to death. Ryan had a way of making even mundane observations sound profound, and his laugh was infectious in a way that made me remember what it felt like to be genuinely happy. What started as innocent conversation at family gatherings quickly evolved into something much more dangerous. Ryan began suggesting we meet for coffee to discuss a photography project he was planning for local businesses. I told David I was working late and started meeting Ryan at a small coffee shop downtown, far enough from our neighborhood to avoid running into anyone we knew. These coffee meetings became the highlight of my week. Ryan would bring his laptop and show me his latest work, while I shared stories about my abandoned dreams of working in art museums or traveling to see the great masterpieces in person. He understood my frustration with feeling creatively stifled, and I related to his struggle with feeling like a disappointment compared to his successful brothers. Ryan photographed me during what he called professional photo shoots for his portfolio. For the first time in years, I felt beautiful and interesting. He had a way of capturing angles and expressions that made me see myself as someone worth noticing. The camera loved me when Ryan was behind it, and I began to understand why people said the photographer matters more than the equipment. Our text messages became constant throughout the day. Good morning wishes evolved into sharing random thoughts, inside jokes, and the kind of intimate conversations I had stopped having with David years earlier. I started deleting our message history and investing more time in my appearance before family events, hoping Ryan would notice. David did notice that I seemed happier and more energetic, but he attributed it to the spring weather and never dug deeper. I was grateful for his lack of curiosity, even as I felt guilty about my deception. The physical attraction was undeniable and growing stronger with each encounter. Accidental touches when reaching for the same menu, lingering eye contact across crowded rooms, and the electric feeling when Ryan would lean close to show me something on his phone. I began fantasizing about a completely different life, where I traveled with Ryan supporting his artistic career while rediscovering my own creative passions. Jasmine noticed my changed behavior and asked probing questions about my sudden interest in photography and art events, but I deflected with vague mentions of wanting to expand my horizons. I could not risk anyone discovering what was really happening, especially since I was not entirely sure myself. The turning point came during a family camping trip to Cuyahoga Valley National Park in late summer. The Morrison clan had rented several cabins for a long weekend of hiking, fishing, and the kind of wholesome family bonding that usually left me feeling like an outsider. But this time, Ryan was there, and everything felt different. On our second evening, while everyone gathered around the campfire, sharing stories and roasting marshmallows, Ryan suggested we take a walk to gather more firewood. My heart raced as we ventured into the woods together, leaving the warm glow of the fire behind for the silvery darkness illuminated only by moonlight filtering through the trees. We found ourselves by a small lake, and Ryan began talking about feeling trapped by family expectations and the pressure to be successful like Marcus. I shared my own feelings of being stuck in a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. Under the vast canopy of stars with a gentle sound of water lapping against the shore, our conversation became more intimate than ever before. When Ryan confessed that he had developed serious feelings for me, my world tilted on its axis. The kiss that followed was passionate and desperate, filled with months of suppressed attraction and emotional connection. I felt more alive in that moment than I had in years, as if I was finally becoming the person I was meant to be. The guilt hit immediately afterward, but it was overwhelmed by the exhilaration of feeling truly desired and understood. We returned to the campfire separately, and I spent the rest of the weekend in a daze of excitement and terror. Our relationship escalated quickly after that night. Weekly photography sessions became our cover for romantic meetings in neighboring cities where we were unlikely to be recognized. Ryan rented a small studio apartment ostensibly for his work, but it became our secret refuge where we could be ourselves without the weight of family obligations and social expectations. I became an expert at elaborate deception, telling David I was working late on important projects, attending girls' nights with Jasmine, or visiting my parents in Columbus. The lies came easily because they served a purpose that felt essential to my survival. I was not just having an affair, I was reclaiming a part of myself that had been buried under years of compromise and settling. After 8 months of living a double life, the weight of deception became unbearable. Ryan was growing impatient with the secrecy and began pressuring me to make a decision about our future. He painted pictures of us starting fresh somewhere new, perhaps Portland or San Francisco, where his photography could flourish and we could build the kind of creative, adventurous life we both craved. The fantasy was intoxicating, but the reality of what leaving would mean was terrifying. Still, I convinced myself that David and I had grown apart naturally, that we were both just going through the motions of a marriage that had run its course. I deserved happiness, did I not? I had spent years being the dutiful wife supporting David's predictable career while my own dreams withered. The confession came during what should have been a routine dinner at Red Lobster on a Tuesday evening. David was discussing weekend plans when I interrupted him with words that would change both our lives forever. David, I need to tell you something important. I've been seeing someone else and I think I want a divorce. The color drained from his face as he set down his fork. What do you mean seeing someone else, like an affair? Yes, I am in love with Ryan. The silence stretched between us before David's voice came out as barely a whisper. Ryan. My brother Ryan. I nodded, unable to speak, as I watched my husband's world crumble. David stood up abruptly, throwing his napkin on the table as other diners turned to stare at our booth. How could you do this? With my own brother? How long has this been going on? When I admitted it had been 8 months, David stormed out of the restaurant, leaving me with the check and the judgmental stares of strangers who had witnessed our marriage implode. Within hours, David had called Marcus and then their parents. By the next morning, I was summoned to a family meeting at the Morrison house where I faced the wrath of people who had welcomed me as their daughter for 6 years. Marcus was furious in a way I had never seen before. You have destroyed this family's reputation, Teresa. Do you have any idea what people are going to say about us? Robert and Eleanor looked at me with the kind of disappointment usually reserved for criminals. We welcomed you into our family, loved you like our own daughter. How could you betray that trust? Sarah called me a homewrecker and accused me of being selfish and destructive. Even Ryan's defense of me was half-hearted, more focused on avoiding conflict with Marcus than protecting the woman he claimed to love. The divorce proceedings moved swiftly. David filed immediately and requested that I forfeit any claim to spousal support given the circumstances. My own family in Columbus was ashamed and disappointed, with my mother delivering the cutting observation that I had thrown away a good marriage for a fantasy. Our mutual friends uniformly chose David's side, viewing him as the innocent victim of his wife's betrayal. My professional reputation suffered as office gossip spread, and I received warnings about my declining performance due to the stress. But the most devastating revelation was yet to come. Ryan began showing his true colors as the reality of our situation set in. He hesitated about making our relationship public, claiming we should wait until the dust settled. The pressure from Marcus about protecting the family business connections was intense, and Ryan proved far less willing to fight for us than he had been to pursue me in secret. Our fights increased as I pushed for the commitment and public acknowledgement he had promised during our clandestine meetings. The thrill of the forbidden affair was gone, replaced by the messy reality of building a life together while dealing with the wreckage of what we had destroyed. After losing our family home in the divorce and most of our shared assets, I moved into a small apartment and watched my savings disappear to legal fees. The social isolation was perhaps worse than the financial strain. Without David's family or our shared friends, my world had shrunk to just Ryan and Jasmine, who remained loyal despite her obvious disapproval of my choices. 8 months after my divorce was finalized, Ryan finally proposed. It was more desperation than romance, a gesture meant to prove to his family and mine that our relationship had been worth the destruction. The courthouse wedding was attended only by Jasmine, who served as our witness while expressing private concerns about the rushed timeline. Our honeymoon at a cheap motel in Kentucky was a stark contrast to the romantic getaways we had dreamed about during our affair. The passion that had felt so intense when it was forbidden began to fade when it became ordinary and expected. The new marriage brought problems I had not anticipated. Ryan's photography generated inconsistent income, forcing me to work two jobs while he pursued his artistic vision. The financial stress was compounded by Ryan's increasing moodiness and criticism of what he called my negative attitude about our situation. The man who had once made me feel seen and appreciated became distant and critical. Ryan blamed me for isolating him from his family, conveniently forgetting that he had been an equal participant in our affair. The sexual spark that had felt so electric during our secret meetings disappeared as quickly as it had arrived. For 2 years, I tried to make our marriage work while rebuilding my life from scratch. I had convinced myself that this was what true love looked like, that the challenges we faced were just obstacles to overcome together. But deep down, I knew I had made a terrible mistake, though I was too proud and too invested to admit it. Then came the day that would finally shatter my remaining illusions. I was looking for a charging cable in Ryan's photography bag when I found his phone. A text notification from Jasmine made my blood run cold. She never has to know about us. You understand me in ways she never could. The message history revealed a 3-month affair that had been unfolding right under my nose. My husband and my best friend, the only two people left in my corner, had been betraying me with each other. The messages were filled with intimate details about their connection and casual dismissals of my feelings and intelligence. When I confronted Jasmine, she broke down and confessed immediately. I was lonely too, Teresa. After watching you implode your life, I felt so isolated, and Ryan was there. He listened to me complain about work, about my dating disasters, about feeling left behind by all our friends who chose David's side. Ryan did not even try to deny it when I confronted him. Instead, he blamed me for the affair, claiming I had become bitter and needy, nothing like the confident woman he had fallen for. You have changed, Teresa. You are not the person I fell in love with. Jasmine understands what I'm going through in ways you never could. The double betrayal was more devastating than anything I had experienced. My husband and my best friend, the last two people in my support system, had conspired against me while I struggled to rebuild my life around them. I called in sick to work for a week and barely left my bed. The weight of what I had lost crashed over me in waves. I had destroyed a stable marriage, alienated my family, lost my home and financial security, and ruined my reputation in the community I'd called home for years. And for what a man who had now betrayed me exactly the way we had betrayed David. In my darkest moments, I stared at the bottle of sleeping pills in my medicine cabinet and wondered if everyone would be better off without me. I had become the villain in my own story, the cautionary tale about what happens when you throw away everything good in pursuit of a fantasy. The eviction notice arrived while Ryan was moving his belongings out. He and Jasmine were getting their own place together, leaving me with all the debts and none of the support. As I sat alone in my empty apartment with nothing but a suitcase and the ruins of my former life, I finally understood what I'd done. I had convinced myself that David and I were incompatible, that our marriage was loveless and unfulfilling. But as I looked back with clear eyes, I remembered the small kindnesses he had shown me daily, the way he brought me coffee every morning, how he always checked that I'd gotten home safely when I worked late. David had loved me in quiet, steady ways that I had dismissed as boring. The phone call to David was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I do not want anything from you, I told him through tears. I just want you to know that I am sorry. I destroyed something good because I was too selfish and stupid to appreciate what I had. David's response surprised me with its gentleness. I have been in therapy, Teresa. I have learned to forgive you, and I hope you can learn to forgive yourself. We both deserved better than what we had, but destroying it was not the answer. He told me he had remarried a kind school teacher named Amanda and that they were genuinely happy together. Instead of feeling jealous, I felt relief that at least one of us had found peace. I wrote letters to Marcus's family acknowledging the pain I had caused, not expecting forgiveness, but needing to take responsibility. The responses never came, but writing those letters helped me begin the process of true accountability. My relationship with my own parents began to heal slowly when my father had a health scare that reminded us all what really mattered. They remained disappointed in my choices, but they gradually opened their door to me again. I enrolled in night school to study social work while supporting myself with retail jobs. Volunteering at a women's shelter introduced me to other people who were rebuilding their lives after major mistakes and losses. For the first time in years, I felt useful and purposeful. Therapy helped me understand that I had been seeking external validation rather than building genuine self worth. I learned to be alone without feeling lonely, to find satisfaction in my work, helping others rather than in romantic relationships that promised to complete me. 2 years after Ryan left, I ran into him at a grocery store. He looked tired and older and mentioned that Jasmine had left him for someone else. When he suggested we try again, I realized I felt nothing for him anymore. No anger, no longing, no regret, just complete indifference to the man who had once seemed like my salvation. Today, I live simply but honestly. I have a small apartment that I decorated according to my own taste, a job that gives me purpose helping families in crisis, and a slowly rebuilding relationship with my parents. I am single by choice, focusing on becoming the kind of person who does not need to destroy other people's lives to feel alive. The grass was not greener on the other side. It was just different grass that required tearing up everything I had planted to reach it. Real love does not ask you to burn bridges or betray the people who have loved you faithfully. Sometimes the person you are really betraying is yourself. Have you ever made a decision that completely changed the trajectory of your life? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below about whether you think some mistakes are unforgivable or if everyone deserves a second chance. Please hit that like button if this story resonated with you and subscribe for more real life stories about love loss and finding your way back to yourself. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it is possible to rebuild after losing everything. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the longest journey is the one back to who you were meant to be all along.